Thank you, guys. And firstly, let me just apologize again for being a bit late. We should have actually made it nicely. The plane landed at Atlanta Airport at 2:15, and we were through everything and got a car, but we did not anticipate the traffic. So according to the GPS, we should have been here by 5. We were here about 5:25, and then circled the building. All the doors are locked. But we're here, and I thank you also for all of you coming out here. Now, I understand that a number of you are pre-vet students, and there's also veterinary students, mostly pre-vet in animal science. And I was asked to talk a bit about the wildlife diseases, and that's what I'll just do, just from the point of view of wildlife management. We're not going to talk how to treat all these things, but more how to manage it. Because in Africa, where you have diseases in wildlife, you seldom really hands-on deal with the animals. It's more a matter of if there's an outbreak of some disease, then you start making ecological decisions how to prevent the disease from spreading. All right, so I see I'll talk about, I see my slide situation is such that I'm going to need to talk about this first, so let's do that. This is then that Eco-Life Expeditions program. Is there anybody here that have participated in one of these programs? Haha. For us. Yeah, yeah, I remember you, of course. Yeah, okay, well then I'm going to stop talking. You guys must talk. I'm going to show a few slides and then you can talk.
Okay.
Okay, as you see there, this program started many years ago at the University of Pretoria with the Wildlife Management Department. And we've run this program for last probably 15 years as a 22-day expedition. And it was also a 6-credit course. We're moving that to a different university to more sort of justify the expense of this subject. That's the kind of vehicle, and I'm glad Aldi is here. He was the first guy to drive that vehicle with students around the country. And that's our bus. I don't know. Did you go with that one? Well known as Jezebel. It's a house, it's a classroom, it's a hotel, it's a kitchen, it's the works. We do rural, we first do some rural people stuff. We help rural people with their pets and whatever problem there can be. We used to do it in Soweto. We're now moving a little bit further east where we simply give veterinary assistance with the help of a qualified veterinarian to rural communities which would otherwise have not seen any kind of veterinary support. So when we stop with that bus, they queue up, they bring their dogs, their cats, their ducks, whatever. And as you can probably see, that dog, he doesn't like being there. And the kids bring their puppies. And then the students do all sorts of treatments. And this is a real hands-on thing because they just, for 2 days they do this. And as I say, it's real hands-on stuff which they normally wouldn't do in a more civilized environment like in the United Nations, in the United States. But that is the only service these animals will get, and there's a vet that guides them how to do things. Right after that, they do a game capture course. There's the class, they learn how to handle a game capture gun, how the darts work, what kind of drugs you use for different animals. They shoot with these guns and targets, and also we put each student in a helicopter, and they must then hit the moving target, and the one that hits the bullseye get the beer. And then there's all sorts of practical stuff that's being done in the process of capturing wildlife. We don't go out to just catch wildlife for the sake of catching wildlife. We join up with the game capture teams, and I should maybe tell you that in South Africa, 75% of all wildlife and all wildlife land belongs to private individuals, corporations, or tribes. Only a quarter is state-run. And there is in the order of 22 million head of wildlife on private land. And there's some 66 game auctions every year. I'll talk a bit about that later on again. I think I have to talk about the economics of it. We'll see how the time runs. But anyway, so there's game being bought and sold, and they need to be caught and taken to different places. And we simply join with those guys and assist with those capture operations. We don't catch animals just for the sake of demonstrating how to do it. But there's a rhinoceros that has been darted, and we have the students there to assist with that. And you see, you need a very strong guy to move an animal like that around. One guy like that, he can do the job of 4 students. You see. That's our one veterinarian, John. I don't know if you guys met him. We have several vets, but that's one of the vets that helped on the student game capture program. And you can see he's got a junior edition of a giraffe there. Okay, then there's certain tests in the Lowveld near Kruger. There's quite a bit of TB, and we'll talk about that soon when we talk about the diseases. So that's animals being caught there. We do wildlife behavior. Well, there, and you guys probably recognize that man. And then we do some elephant work, and I also get the opportunity to go for a ride on these elephants. All right, I'm not going to talk. Then there's animal rehab, and I'm going to show you a short video that will put this whole thing together. That is the honey badger. We'll get my Afrikaans and English words right. Okay. Let me show you the little video and then we can go on with the rest.
Yeah, we shadowed the wildlife vet at the very end of the program, and we got to see them dart a rhino from a helicopter, and we got to be involved with that rhino. I got to give the rhino a shot, and it was a really cool experience, very, very hands-on.
We played with the baby lions. That was really cool. And we saw we went on like a bunch of different safaris. We were lucky. We saw every.
Yeah, we saw everything. We saw a leopard.
Yeah. I don't know. We did a lot of things, but I would highly, highly recommend it. And if anyone has questions later, you can ask us. But we definitely recommend it.
Okay, let's talk a bit about the wildlife diseases then. I'd like to use a few examples, like a viral one, like foot and mouth, and then a bacterial, anthrax, a protozoan one, which is a corridor disease, something very similar to African East Coast fever. And then another bacterial one, just because it is so topical now, it's a bit of a problem out in the eastern part of the country, and that's bovine tuberculosis. A biochemical one, which is pansteatitis, and then Clostridium to link up with the rhino stuff that Brendan has been talking about. We lost quite a number of rhinos in our summer in the late rain season this year, and which was quite unusual to lose so many due to this disease of Clostridium. Okay, foot and mouth. Okay, as I said, it's a viral disease, and it's not really a deadly disease. Mortality is pretty low, but this disease is quite infectious, and when it does spill over into domestic stock, then you've got an economical problem because nobody wants to use any of that domestic stock or for the purposes of meat consumption. We know, for instance, a few years ago there was such an outbreak in the UK, in England, and they had to euthanize literally thousands of cattle and sheep that showed signs of foot and mouth disease. It's very contagious. There you see about the outbreak in the UK. In the Kruger National Park, which is a 2 million hectare, in your terms, it's about a 6.5 million acres national park in the northeastern part of the country. And it came in there, we never had bovine TB in the wildlife prior to about the year 2000. The first signs was in the late 1990s, and that was in buffalo. And it was thought that we could maybe prevent it spreading in buffalo, but it became prevalent in buffalo, and today there's very few buffalo in Kruger that does not have bovine TB. But they don't all die, some get weak, and some just never show any signs. The carrier of this disease is in fact impalas, and as you can see there, 83% of the outbreaks is in the dry season, and the vector is then impalas, which is the antelopes that you can see in the background there. Typical of this, that's also why it's called foot and mouth disease. It causes these sores, as you can see there on the gums and on the tongue. And what do you think is wrong with this photograph? Ah, shouldn't do a thing like that without gloves. Okay, then anthrax, which is a bacterial disease. It is caused by Bacillus anthracis. It's a disease in the wildlife, not only in Kruger, but also in the surrounding wildlife areas. You can see there it is quite contagious, and animals that can suddenly die of this. In order to propagate the disease, the bacteria must kill the animal, and then once it starts being pulled over or pulled apart by hyenas and vultures, then the fluids come loose and the spores can then move around. This thing is running on its own here. That's what the blood smear looks like. So when in certain times of the year, especially in the dry season, you do get this, and also when the population density is fairly high, you can get this. It's not a disease that, from a wildlife management point of view, we're too worried about. It is almost a kind of population regulatory disease, and also takes out the weaker genes. But still, when we do find carcasses that have clearly died of anthrax, the idea is then to not dissect them or cut them open, but to dig a hole and bury it and cover it with chlorine of lime, or even easier, if there's enough wood around, to just incinerate the carcass. How does it spread? Well, there's two main ways. The one is the kudu blowfly cycle, and the other one is the vulture water cycle. Now let's just have a quick look at each of these. Now, when an animal dies as a result of this disease, I must say, I had somebody mess around with these slides. The thing run on its own here. Yeah, there's something wrong. But anyway, now you can see when this carcass starts rotting, there's plenty of these blowflies that get on, and they feed on the liquid and the rotting meat. And these blowflies then sit on leaves around. Now, kudu is browsers. They don't eat grass, they only eat leaves. And these blowflies then defecate, as you will see in this other slide. They go and sit on branches, they sit on leaves, and they make these droplets like you can see there. And there's millions of these bacteria in the droplets. Along comes the kudu, and feeds on these leaves, Now this background noise need to be get out of here as well. I must go find out who is the sculptor that did this to me. Definitely not my creation. As yet.
I have a question. You said some of the animals die suddenly without showing any symptoms, so how do you know that they died of anthrax if you don't have symptoms?
Well, if there's dead animals that time of the year, and particularly if it's kudus, you can just 99% be sure it is. And there's some other symptoms as well, you'll see now. Okay, then vultures also pull these carcasses apart and they stick their heads right into this rotten meat. And then, typical vulture, when they've eaten a lot and they're full of blood and goo, they go for a bath. And they go in water troughs or in dams. And then once they go and have a swim, like you can see in a place like that, they spread these bacteria all over the water, and other animals that come and drink and walk into these water sources then pick it up. Predators are less susceptible to anthrax. When they get it the first time, you can see they get swellings of the head, like you can see in that one, but they don't die. They feel a bit miserable and swollen, and then once that heals, next time they don't even show a symptom. So they're quite resistant. That was a leopard, same thing. You can see how swollen it is, particularly around the area of the saliva glands. Okay, vaccination. But vaccination is not a solution in a huge wilderness area. It's burning the carcasses. That's a good one, and then of course burying them. Oh, I see I didn't have those slides in about, but anyway, yeah, I didn't have all the slides in here. But some of these kudu develop big lumps on the side of the head, and you just know that's. No, but you pile really a lot of wood, so you basically incinerate the carcass. So with that, live biological material will die as a result of the heat. Okay, corridor disease, just 2 words about corridor disease. It is pretty much prevalent in buffalo, and it is carried by the brown ear tick, which you see there, Rhipicephalus appendiculatus, and this this tick. What's interesting, the buffalo don't show any signs or any symptoms of corridor disease, and corridor disease is very similar to African East Coast fever. But when the tick gets on the buffalo and sucks the blood in, he gets these protozoans, these Theileria parva lorenzi, get these protozoans in the mouth parts, and then when they go off buffalo and onto cattle, then they infect the cattle with these protozoans. And cattle got no resistance. 24 hours, they're dead. There was even at one point tests. They said, well, if you want to know if your buffalo have got TB, corridor disease, just inject a little bit of blood of the buffalo into the cow, and if it dies, you know it's the buffalo is sick, or is a carrier. It wouldn't show symptoms.
Is it at all zoonotic, where like if the cow got infected and got killed and eaten before it died of disease, would it affect?
There's no documentation that people get it. No, fortunately, yeah.
Small window for that to happen.
Yeah. There's no evidence that people have been infected. I just put that slide in because this disease had its origin in this area there, between 2 reserves, and that's why it's called the corridor between 2 reserves, Shishluwe and Umvelozi. And that's what that protozoan looks like. It gets into the red blood cells and eventually just stifles these animals, because then these red blood cells cannot carry oxygen or CO2 anymore. Okay, bovine TB. Okay, this is Mycobacterium bovis. We didn't have any of this. It's a serious infectious disease, and it's an exotic disease. It came into the wildlife community from Mozambique, which is our neighbor to the east. And I think Brendan must have spoken also about the poachers coming from Mozambique. We got a bit of a troublesome neighbor on our eastern side. So the evidence is there that bovine TB came from cattle in Mozambique, and wildlife had very little resistance against it because it's an exotic disease for wildlife. We never had TB in wildlife, and then all of a sudden now we have it. And different species react differently to it. The first diagnosis was made in 1990 in a young buffalo, and then since then it's spread. And there's been all sorts of ways to try and prevent the further spread of it north. It was considered to put a fence right across the park. But then once they really started thinking about that, already there was cases, positive cases of TB north of the sort of central river in the park. Okay, so African buffalo have it. It's highly susceptible. And buffalo are herd animals. Droplets of saliva onto other animals, or they lick each other, then they get carried. It's asymptomatic until in an advanced stage. And you can see there, well, that's typical what lungs look like when it's really infected. Oh, there I got the kudus. But this is, okay, this is now tuberculosis. If you see a kudu with these swellings, you'll know that this is a TB. And TB typically, it sort of dissolves the tissue. This one, if you cut it open, it looks like that. Question there? Why? The evidence says that they pick it up through saliva. So it's going to come in at the head area, and somehow it just settles in there. And that is clearly the area where the parotid glands, and once they get in there, it sort of solidifies and uses the tissue around the parotid glands to cause this infected blobs that you see there. I mean, it's... And when you see that, you know that's TB. Okay, so bovine TB outbreak in Kruger Park, threatening disease ever since independence. It's a real bad disease, but it's fairly under control. There was much more concern about it than I think really today. There's not that many animals that die. It seems to be almost as if they're beginning to develop some kind of resistance. Oops. Okay, then biochemical disease. We now spoke about viruses and bacteria and protozoans. Let's look at this one, which is an interesting one. I had this PhD student he was working on crocodiles. And we were looking actually at the crocodile ecology in the eastern part of the country. And then there you see my student there. He's the second man from the front. And in the process of studying the crocodiles had to be caught, and they had to be get tracking devices on them. Now that was the fun part. I always made sure that I was there when it's the fun part, to go and catch these crocs and put these devices on them. There you see such a tracking device. That's a cell phone in that little box connected to a GPS. So whenever this croc comes out and is within cell phone reach, then it sends out SMS with the GPS connections. Yeah, it's cool. You sit in the bar. My crocodile sends a message. But to catch them is quite a nice operation. You must, of course, put some masking tape around the mouth. That's a sharp end. They don't have strong muscles to open the mouth, but they've got very strong muscles to close. So once you've got some tape around it, it's fine. But then in September of 2008, September, October, there was a large-scale mortalities of crocodiles in the Kruger Park area. And everybody ran around and couldn't understand why. And also my PhD student joined parks people as well as the guys from the vet school to try and figure out what was the cause of death. Some 200 crocodiles died in one river system over a distance of about 20 kilometers. And this disease was then identified as being pansteatitis. Now, pansteatitis is caused when they feed on a diet which is rich in unsaturated fatty acids and low in vitamin E. Now, why would this change be? Water quality went down and fish started dying. And crocodiles, they feed quite a lot on fish when they swim underwater. They do catch also, they're opportunistic, they eat anything. But they do catch quite a bit of fish. But if the fish die and they drift on the water and they start becoming russet and decompose, that's very easy for the crocodiles then to feed on that fish. And when it decomposes, that's when you have this imbalance in high levels of unsaturated fatty acids and low vitamin E. So now they get an overdose of these in, or an imbalance, and that leads to this pansteatitis. So the dead crocodiles also got eaten by live crocodiles because they're cannibalistic, and that just further spread this disease of pansteatitis. So the strategy then by the Kruger Park field staff was to get rid of any signs of dead crocs. And so we had people out there to, interns, and when they find dead crocs, they radio the GPS position, and the dead crocs was taken out with helicopters. And the dead crocs were then sampled for the analysis of the disease, and they were then incinerated so that no other animal could eat the dead crocs in order to prevent the spread of the pansteatitis. Now, crocodiles have got a very strong tail. They use it for swimming, they use it to move around. They can also sort of jump like a jack-in-the-box out of the river, like you can see there, and catch their prey. And what does pansteatitis really do? Now, this is a cross-section of a tail of a croc. And you can see there, I'll show on this board on, I'll just do it on this guy. You see the white there? Now, this is, all the red tissue here is muscles. So they got very strong muscles in the tail. And that's what they swim and jump around with. But between these muscles are layers of fatty tissue. It's almost like a lubricant between the different blood muscle bundles. And those sort of vacuoles of fatty tissue, it's soft, almost like the glycerine. And that gives the mobility. So what happens when you get this biochemical imbalance is that stuff starts solidifying and looks like that. So it becomes almost like a cheese-like substance. Now you can imagine if that soft tissue now becomes like a cheese, it's going to lead to paralysis. The tail can't move. And that's what causes these animals to then die. Also the base of the legs. There's also been some reports of pansteatitis in certain birds here in the US. But it was very sporadic, not much. But we had quite a plague of this pansteatitis amongst the crocodiles. But then after that, there's not that much of it anymore. But still, we have rivers that get polluted by mine water effluents, and it causes fish to die, and that's a bad cycle, and then you have eventually the crocodiles that die. But crocodiles, they can also die of being dumb. I mean, look at this fellow. He's taking a shortcut. Now, to take shortcut over hippopotamus, not advisable. Bad news. Because hippos, they don't really like crocodiles, because crocodiles are opportunistic. If they get the gap, they'll go for the baby hippopotamus and try and catch them. So this guy gets bitten, and once he gets bitten by a hippo like that, that's one dead crocodile. So good advice to crocodile, don't take shortcut over hippopotamus. But other good advice is do not eat humans, they get annoyed. You can see in that case, he ate a human and then he got shot. So yeah, there you see there's a guy's arm, and so Ah, there's his leg. So this guy probably went for a swim. It cost him an arm and a leg. But crocodiles, there's quite a number of crocodile farms in the country now where they breed these crocodiles, and this is also a place where they breed them, and commercially then market the skins. There you see breeding groups of these crocs, and then that's also a wise guy student that made this as a result of an incident of this nature. Okay, I think I should not talk much more. I wasn't here when you spoke about the rhinos. Now that, of course, is in our country right now a serious problem. And Brendan saved the day by telling you a bit about that. And so I don't want to expand on what he said. I can maybe just give you a few figures. In New Zealand, well, I just want to compare this. In New Zealand, deer are being bred. There's plenty red deers in New Zealand, and they use the velvet. They harvest the velvet, and it's used for all these kinds of stuff there. You see, they make these pills and they sell it to the Chinese. In Peru, the vicuña is an animal that almost died out, that almost went extinct as a result of poaching. And people were after the skin of these vicuña because vicuña got very fine hair. Very nice animal, but so what happened then, the vicuña numbers went very low, and it's a very unique hair. You can see the prices, and people pay big money to have a vicuña coat. If you have a vicuña coat, man, then you have arrived. It's very, very expensive stuff. It's even on the Peru coat of arms, you see a vicuña there. A very important animal now. But this species just about went extinct as a result of being killed for the skin and the hair. In the early 1960s, there was just about 100 of them left in the whole of South America. And then the Italians that were the buyers of this hair convinced the people not to kill the animal, rather keep them and sort of harvest, keep them in large areas, round them up, shave the hair. Don't kill the animal. You can shave it, and that's what happened. And look what the turnaround from the brink of extinction because of the commercialization of that product. It is today almost 500,000 of those animals. So you don't have to kill them. Okay, they look a bit odd when they get shaved. I must agree. But it's better to look odd than to be dead. But what I want to say with these species as examples, okay, this is then a win-win situation, as you can see there all the way. The species was saved from extinction. Poor people now got an income because they sold the hair, and the market demand was satisfied. Now, the price of velvet, $160 a kilogram. It's a legal trade. The animal is not killed to get the velvet, and there's no poaching, and there's 1.15 million of these animals in New Zealand. Vicuña sells at $800 for a kilo. Legal, the animal stays alive, virtually no poaching. There's close on 500,000 of these animals in Peru today. But the rhinos, horns sell at about $90,000 for 1 kilogram. It's illegal. CITES made it illegal, and the only way there's now a trade is by killing the animals. Poachers kill the animals to get the horn. That's the only way. So if you want horn, you must deal with poachers, and the main beneficiaries nowadays is Al-Qaeda. The branch of Al-Qaeda in Somalia, Al-Shabaab, Your CIA has shown that they earn $650,000 US per month from rhino horn. And our numbers are going down. So those species where you can harvest go up and it's legal, ours is illegal and the numbers go down because they kill the animals. There's no reason to kill a rhino to get the horn because the horn grows all the time. You can slice a kilogram off, or 1.5 kilos every year. It's just going to regrow. It grows like your fingernails. And the other thing is that 93% of all the rhinos in the world is today in South Africa. And we better do something about it to protect these animals. We're not all that successful at this point, but we're moving towards being reasonably successful. And thanks to the organization that we're involved with, both Brendan and myself, as a US Foundation, Wildlife Protection Solutions, we hope to also be able to contribute to making a difference. Okay, I think I should stop at this point, and if there's any questions or discussion on anything that we spoke about, we can do that. I saw that I had to talk about two things, and the other one was economics of wildlife, and I think we sort of, maybe there's a piece of pizza left. Question.
Thank you.
There's a question, yeah?
Yes. I was just wondering, would it be possible for people who are already darting these animals to keep up with the health of them? Could they dart them and take the horns off of them and then, just release them so that poachers can't? I mean, there's no reason to poach them at that point.
Yeah. You see, there's a number of private rhino owners in the country, and I've just been 2 days ago, on Monday, I spent the whole day fighting with government people, and on my side was a lawyer and the biggest private rhino owner in the world. This guy's got 1.2 thousand. He's got 1,200 rhinos on his farm. And he does dart them, and he does cut horn off and put, but it doesn't really deter the poachers. They still want what's left. Because if you cut off, if you take the whole horn, you shouldn't cut more than 50% of the whole thing.
Right.
And they would come for the other 50%.
It just seems like it would make it less worth it.
It does make it less worth it, but at the price of $90,000 for a kilo, and the average weight of a rhino horn is about 4 kilograms. So you can work out, it's more than double the price of gold. So no wonder everybody who's a bad guy, all the bad guys, they want part of the action.
Yeah. Has there been any move to reduce the demand for rhino horns?
Yes, there has been, but it's not successful. There's often a comparison being made. You see, in China, people were also very keen to use shark fin. They use shark fins to make soup. And there's a famous Chinese basketball player. I forgot his name for the moment. Yeah, that guy. He went around China and said, "Hey guys, you shouldn't eat soup made of shark fins. It's bad news for sharks." And there's a visible decline in the illegal harvesting of sharks because they kill the sharks to get the fins. But that's a soup. It's easy to convince a guy not to eat a soup from a fin and from a shark, but rather use a soup from a chicken or something else. But rhino horn has been used for more than 2,000 years as a medicine. And they use it for all sorts of things, like, cancer, headaches, boils, hallucinations, bad love life, you name it. It works for everything. So, the moment a product works for everything, it really works for nothing, because it is just keratin and a bit of calcium. But they believe in it. And their grandfather was cured of his cancer from it. And so you're in a different ballgame when you start persuading people not to use something that saved other people's lives and is good medicine. And there's scrolls from 681 BC where already it talks about rhino horn's medicinal values. So you're not going to easily dissuade people to use it. But now, okay, let me not though. There's a question.
I was wondering how many of the large poaching groups, how many, I guess, the significant ones would you say there are that give the most trouble, and about how big are they?
Okay, Brendan, you must back me up here. The latest info that I got is that at any point in time in Kruger National Park alone, there's about 10 groups of poachers moving around.
Yeah, there's 15,
Was it-
15 known groups. that
is it
operate
15?
from Mozambique into Kruger.
And this year alone, they've shot and killed 37, I think it was, up to last weekend.
Yeah.
But for every one you shoot, okay,
That's
sorry?
shoot on site in the park at night, correct?
Yes. So they get shot, there's more that get arrested. But my feeling, and if I can dwell 2 minutes on it, is that I don't think shooting and killing poachers is any solution. Because for every one you kill, there's 2 others that come across. And those guys, they live in the bush, in the grass hut there in Mozambique. And the bad guys, they come and give them like $1,000 to say, here's $1,000. Now this guy isn't going to earn $1,000 in 10 years. If you go over the fence and kill a rhino and bring the horn, that doesn't make him a criminal, and makes him an opportunist. And also he's got a wife and children, and we shoot him and we leave all these people destitute. So what I believe we should do is we should go there in Mozambique. And in fact, we're busy with a program of this nature in the Congo, in the DRC, to create a large ranch, a reserve. Put wildlife in there for tourism, but also put in rhinos, so that they can breed those rhinos and harvest the horn and sell it. Sell it legally, regulated trade. And the income that you will generate will support dirt poor people. I got some slides about that, but I don't want to carry on too much about that. But there's some really poor people there in the Congo, as well as in Mozambique. And if they can now have a revenue from this resource, I'm sure that they will protect that resource and not exploit it. You know, in Africa, people have failed wildlife, but I think wildlife won't fail people. And we should focus that wildlife can be a big source of food security. And I would one day like to see more reserves run by communities to the benefit of the communities, and let the flagship animal be the rhino.
So why is it that it's such a difficult thing to get the ivory trade legalized? It sounds like everything's been pretty well thought through with it.
The ivory trade. You're talking elephants.
I'm sorry, no, not the ivory trade,
Yeah, well, okay. You say exactly the right thing. It makes so much sense, because CITES is this international, it's almost like a UN body. It stands for the Convention on the International Trade of Endangered Species, CITES. You can go and Google it. And there's about 170 countries that's members of CITES. Now you got, and each country has got one vote. Now South Africa, that's got 93% of the world's rhinos, and we know what to do with them, got one vote. But Azerbaijan and Turkmenistan and all these guys got one vote. They don't even know what a rhino looks like. And there are animal rights people that bribe these guys to vote according to what they preach. And there's a lobby that says,
The private rhino owners in South Africa, there's an organization, they're all members of an organization called the Private Rhino Owners Association, PROA. You can also Google that. Only those members should be allowed to put horn on 1 or 2 per annum auctions and sell it to whoever wants to buy it. And that revenue will be a stimulus for them to use that money to protect, because now it's very expensive to protect the rhino. A dead rhino is much more worth than a live one. Okay. So a regulated trade, we've got DNA samples of horn, of tissue. We're not going to allow outside smugglers to come with a bag of horn and they say, I want to sell it. Put that guy in jail. It's only people that are registered and only a regulated, legitimate trade. That's what we preach. And that's what we try and tell cyclists to allow us. And it's not easy. We hope that with the next cyclist meeting, we will be able to convince them I'm not too optimistic.
What is that?
2016. But we need the United States to back us. The representative of the US, and I've been arguing with them already. Because somebody was told, these guys don't understand this. You know, there's many guys there in the US Fish and Wildlife Service. They don't even know that rhino horn grows at 1.5 kilograms per annum. That's the rate at which rhino horns grow. They think, oh, it's like ivory. So, talk to your congressman. Support us.
Has anyone given any thought to, I mean, I'm thinking like, I guess not domesticating rhinos, but starting to farm the horns like we're talking about. Has anyone given any thought to like issues that might come up with like reducing the genetic variability in a population? You know, if you're, say, breeding rhinos to have like the biggest horns or fastest growing horns or something like that, how that might affect wild populations or something to that effect?
Well, okay, there's two. On the one hand, there isn't really a movement to try and create a super rhino that's going to make some really fast growing.
Right, but if you made it a market at
From a
some
business
point.
point of view, that's not a bad idea.
Right,
But at this point, it's not happening.
yeah,
But the populations on ranches, if I take, for example, this guy, John Yu, that has got 1,200 in his farm. He's brought them from different parts of the country. But he's not going to release them in the national parks. I mean, that's expensive animals. That's his animal. So I don't see them being, say, genetically contaminated while roaming around. But I think it's better to have these animals back up here. Because everybody talks about all the numbers. We lost last year alone over 1,000 rhinos to poachers. But this guy produced 200. So we need more producers. We must outbreed the poachers.
Just one more question. Is there a worry of like extinction of the rhino? These wild rhinos become so more valuable than ultimately put on the ones that are on their property?
Sure, that's good. Let them. Private owners should hang on to their own and just use the horn, because that's good revenue to financially make it viable to keep them and to be able to protect them, because the protection is expensive. There's something else I wanted to say about that. No, I forgot what that was about. Yeah, I think the private production of rhino and rhino horn will be the biggest single step in preventing the species from eventually going extinct. Because at the present rate, that looks bad. If you extrapolate from what we have now, the species by 2030 will be extinct.
Just to address your concern and to tag on to the, you must just realize there's two systems that we're talking about here. Your national parks or your national reserves and your private landowners. On national parks and national reserves, the populations would be allowed to carry on as normal. Not even dehorning, because if you take a park like Kruger National Park, there are too many rhinos to dehorn for their safety and maybe to sell. So your national parks and your reserves, your rhinos would be left alone as much as possible while trying to protect them. But your commercial aspect would be on private landowners. So it would be like you owning cattle.
right.
You would not inbreed your cattle when you keep cattle, because it's not to your benefit. So it would be to your benefit to maintain the genetic diversity in the animals that you keep on your ranch as well. And as Winter said, there's no program afoot to create a super rhino that grows a meter a year kind of thing, or 3 feet a year horn. That would be great business-wise, as we said, but that's two separate. You must separate the two. So in your parks and your reserves, your rhinos will be left alone as much as possible. Any intervention there will only be to protect them. And the whole thing about the dehorning is that if you can't have a ranch with, say, 50 rhino and only dehorn 20. If you do it, you have to do it to all of them because there's social interaction issues. So you can't just do half of a park, the half of the population in the park dehorn them and leave the others, then you're going to create more social problems. So just on your concern there, just keep that in mind, that what we're talking about here is two separate systems.
So just to find out, just put that slide up. UGA suddenly this thing came onto us. This is what it looked like in 2010. Prior to that, we had 20 or 30 animals poached every year, and then all of a sudden it just went 30 on back. All right, well, if there's no more questions, so I thank you for being here. I hope we will maybe see some of you. We're going to need more people in Africa to come and help us to do stuff. And nice talking to you.